This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
These are serious violations. I got to see firsthand just how troublesome they could be on our little adventure home.
We made it.
Dad, come on!
I thought the barrier jammed all communication.
Not if you have the crystal of the founders that we discovered, guarded by an ancient warrior. Did we win? Yes!
Yep. One of my better landings, that is.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I am your host, Dan Zehr. Absolutely delighted to talk Star Wars with you, but it's not just any Star Wars. We are talking about the 8th and final episode of Season 1 of Skeleton Crew, and I say we. If you've been listening to the show for the past few months, you know that I've got two co-pilots who join me to talk about Skeleton Crew, and they're going to circle the wagons. Well, that's more of a country western thing than it is a pirate thing, but you get the idea. First, we're going to bring in Tom Gross.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to be back on the show. Eight shows.
Yeah.
Time to talk about the final episode.
The final episode. Tom, of course, is from Teachers in the Dungeon. Tom, got some mail, fan mail. It appears that you're passing the Coffee with Kenobi audition. It's a very lengthy process, but
Yes.
You're doing just fine.
That's good. Good to hear.
You might notice, by the way, that Wikipedia, the excellent fan entry page, Wikipedia page, is basically Wikipedia, but it's Star Wars. It's extremely extensive. Coffee with Kenobi is on there now. There's a huge write-up. I just posted it in the CWK Cafe on Coffee with Kenobi's Facebook and Twitter. But it references you as a former contributor because of your contributions on as the newsman.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, that is fun.
Yeah, pretty cool. Our next guest, he's not really a guest anymore. He's family. He's part of the team. He's part of the Coffee with Kenobi family. He has been for a long time, but we've had the pleasure of you being on the show with us for these last few months. It's been a joy and a privilege. Let's bring in Father Jimmy.
Great to be back, and it's truly been my pleasure talking with such great guys over such a great series. And now that I know of Tom's Wikipedia fame, I have new goals and heights to strive for myself.
Yes. Well, those are very, very ambitious, but we have faith in you. All right. So we're going to do it. We're going to talk about the real good guys. I will read the official synopses on StarWars.com. Back home on Atten, Wim, Fern, KB, and Neil have been reunited with their families, but face a dangerous threat in Jod, who continues to pose as a Republic emissary. With Fern and her mother trapped in the supervisor's tower with Jod, it's up to KB, Neil, Wim, and his dad, Wendell, to stop a pirate invasion from taking over their home. So, Father Jimmy, we'll have you kick it off for us. Give us one word and overall reactions to the episode.
My one word was finally. And not because it's the finale, but I feel like they wrapped up a lot of things well. And there were lots of moments where I literally kind of had audible gasps and shouts of finally. Like, there are so many great moments that wrapped up. And I just thought, like, oh, yeah, they finally talked about this or cleared up that or other great moments. So that's why I chose finally.
Excellent. Tom, you know the drill.
Oh, yes. Adventure is my word. What a marvelous conclusion to a tale of good in the galaxy. I think, in this episode, we get I'm trying to think of the word, but we get a final, I guess I'll use your word, Father Jimmy. Finally, we get sort of a wrap on the how we feel about these characters. Like I feel complete, and I feel like we know. I mean, when you're talking about, it's funny how everyone seems to know. Well, we finally know everything that we need to know about all of these characters, I think. And so we've fallen in love with the children, and they're just so much fun. And being kids kind of makes us feel like kids. Oh, and then Jod, or maybe I should say Jude Law. What an amazing performance. I mean, a curtain raising performance. So maybe I have a new favorite character, top 5 character in the Star Wars galaxy.
Wow. That's great. That's great. I'm looking forward to unpacking that with the both of you.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm going to give you my word, but I'm going to preface it first. I think a good story has to have compelling characters that you care about. It has to have the beginning, which is the inciting incident is where everything happens. You've got your exposition. You've got rising action. A number of things happen. Then you got the climax, the most intense emotional moment of the story. You've got the falling action. And then you've got, which is my one word, denouement. Denouement is a French word meaning resolution. This story sets things up, gives a lot of obstacles, and resolves all of the plot threads. This, friends, is how you tell a story. And I loved this finale. I think a finale is hard to do. I think there are very, very few series, movies, epics, books that actually have satisfying conclusions where you cross the T's and dot the I's in a way that doesn't feel forced, but feels like an organic part of the story. So denouement is my word.
Nice.
Very, very happy to talk. All right, Father Jimmy, go ahead and kick it off for us with your first point of interest for the real good guys.
Yes, one of my first points of interest, and it's just it was just kind of fun seeing the way that all the families got back together after that initial moment in the very beginning. Once they're all reunited, but they kind of split up, they go home. It was good to see Wim and his dad. It was good to see just sort of how they all were back home, but you could tell it wasn't quite home yet because the kids were aware of this threatening of pirates kind of beyond the vision of other people. And so I just thought that was a good way to ease back into it, especially once you had at the same time Fern and her mother are now trapped with the supervisor and Jod and in that situation. So they're definitely not home. They're definitely in a difficult spot. I just thought that was an interesting beginning. I liked it where some are back home, some are kind of appearing to be the conclusion of their journey, but the kids know deep down what's really going on, and they find the right opportunity to bring it up.
I think that brings so much of what we've talked about throughout this entire series. The one thing that really stands out, there's several things, but one just right off the top of my head is how we talked about those security droids and how they are basically walking cameras. I don't know about you, but I felt like that was hypersensitive in this one, especially when Wim's talking to his father and the droid's like right there. Why don't you pull up a seat, man?
Like he's watching a tennis match.
Yes. And so that really hung heavy. But the other thing I found interesting about that whole sequence is we know from episode 1 what their daily routine is and what things look like in their homes in a normal circumstance. And here they try to go back to some semblance of that, but so much has changed. Notably, you're walking cameras in the room, but so much has changed between the relationships between the parents and the kids and the growth that the kids have had. And I just think it's shown so much. And of course, there's the elephant in the room with they have something to say, but they can't say it.
I love that you said the elephant in the room because we got to see Neil's dad and he had tusks.
Yeah.
Wasn't that so cool?
Mhm,
What a
mhm.
cool species.
Yeah.
By the way, my one word, I had forgotten it, and I'm glad I didn't kick it off because it would have been too silly. But my one word was going to be bathtub. Like, Neil's got to be the cleanest creature in Star Wars. He's got to be. He's
I thought-
sudsing it up, man. Middle of the night, doesn't matter. He's ready. He's squeaky clean.
I thought that was such a
It was
a
adorable.
fitting place for Neil.
Yes.
Once the power shut down and everything
Yeah.
kind of came to a head, because he's had such an innocence, such a purity, such a cleanness to him.
Yes, yes.
And there's just such a like childlike thing about like how big the bubbles were, you know. But yeah, when
he's the
the
most
power went
loving
out.
character, one of the most loving
Mhm.
characters in Star Wars. There is a cleanness to him. Yes, I agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just saying with it on one hand it was very childlike with how big the bubbles were around him, but then you could tell once the power went out and he could tell something was going on, he had a bit more of an awareness. Like, yes, there's still that very pure and clean and childlike nature to Neil, but he's grown, he's matured, and he's ready to spring into action if needed.
And he's very heroic in this.
Mhm.
Aren't you just positive that that's how Tom takes a bath? Aren't you just positive of that?
That's why I think it's so funny. You know, reality
Yeah.
is the funniest thing that possibly.
Yes. Well, what is Tom? What is the first one you'd like to bring up that isn't related to suds?
Mr. Bubbles. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Of course, I'm sure you know who I want to talk about first, and probably second, and probably third, and that is Jod.
Me too.
So let's talk about his opening scene. First of all, he ends episode 7 igniting the lightsaber in front of the families. After not long before that, show-wise, he talks about carving people up and into pieces, and we talked about that despicable just rant he has with the kids and how scary that was. And so the end of the show, episode 7, you're in terror for that family. So that's how I felt when this whole thing started. But it makes complete sense the way it went, because rather than violence and rather than threatening, Jod returns to his oratorical skills and his charisma like he did with the pirates numerous times. And now we're going to see it in a new light. He gets to play a new character. He's now the Republic emissary. And Joe, I just think it's really interesting and well placed that this is how he's also going to attempt to deal with the parents, the same way he deals with anyone he's trying to trick, as well as the pirates themselves. So my first point is Jod and his amazing rhetorical and charismatic self.
Yeah, I'm gonna make this my first one, and it's gonna build upon what you're saying. Maybe throw a couple of different ideas and see what you think. But to me, we were pretty vocal, and rightfully so, about how much he upset us, how unsettling he was to threaten children with violence, with cruelty, and with the threat of losing their families, which is the worst thing you can do to a child, in my opinion. It's just scary, very scary. And then you see the saber ignited. But then when this starts, Jod does what I didn't expect. He made me rethink him a little bit. And we're going to see that, especially at the end. But in this moment, I realized, and I could be wrong, but I thought, okay, he's not igniting that lightsaber to because he's going to enact violence, but he is still threatening it. Let's be clear. He's not, no one's having Jod as their babysitter. No good parent would do that. But what he is doing with the lightsaber is he's using light to add credibility to his story. Look, I'm the Republic emissary. I got a lightsaber. Hey, check me out. That is his badge. That is his identification. And they go with it. It doesn't feel right because I think there's an energy there that shows us that there's something off, and the parents are astute. The kids are clearly uncomfortable. They do not seem relieved at all, and the parents know their kids, but he's just trying to assert himself and prove himself. And then we see throughout the episode, he still does violent things. He still destroys property. But when KB's appearance is going to crash, he puts his head down, and he's sad. He doesn't want that child to die, and it wasn't an act. He could have gloated or twitched his mustache or been sociopathic, but no, there's more to him than that. So I fully embrace and respect what the storytellers did, certainly what the exceptional Jude Law did with this character, and to remind us that I think we need to always be reminded of as people, as flawed human beings, that there is always more to a person than what you see on the outside. Does that mean we like everything they do? Definitely not. Does that mean we approve? Absolutely not. But there's more. There's more. And that's one of the reasons I love teaching literature, because to me, it's the only subject where you are teaching empathy. And I learned a little bit about empathy from Jod. Not from Jod, but from how I looked at Jod.
I thought it was one thing about Jod and his choices with his charisma that I found interesting was with the pirates, with some of the other times where he would interact and play these characters. It was very charismatic, very often jovial and kind of sweet sounding. But when he was the emissary, he, and fittingly so, employed a much more kind of stern demeanor. Like, he was very insistent that they needed to get back on the ship, and he had reasons, and he could kind of read the room well and still came off like an emissary, but kind of a no-nonsense kind of boss, to try to work to his advantage and take control of the situation. Just to see those different ways that he can act and fool people and so quickly and instantly take on a new persona in order to trick people.
And the more that he yelled, the more frustrated he got, the more he threatened, the less bite he had. I found that to be pretty realistic. He was like a disgruntled, frustrated parent that has no control of his children or the situation. And and instead of trying to find a real way to relate, he raised his voice and he got more angry and frustrated. But and he did, let's be clear, he did shoot it at Wendell. He did shoot it at Wim's father. So, I mean, he's not, I just think maybe he's a bad shot. Maybe he's a stormtrooper. But I don't know. I think he's so complex now. And I'm really happy about that. Really excited about that.
I'll have to go back and watch those shots at the end, because I didn't really find Jod's reaction to seeing that ship go down. I didn't quite read it in the same way that you did, Dan. I just sort of read some indifference when he was seeing that happen. Yeah.
I thought he was bummed. I thought he was sad, and he was frustrated too, because I don't think he wanted these kids to die. And I think he instantly tries to place blame, but I think he knows deep down inside that he had something to do with that. Yeah, I read a lot. I don't know. I wonder, what do you think, Tom?
I saw it like you did, Dan. I thought he felt, to me, I felt like there was disappointment.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure. That's what I had a hard time reading of it, is what or who was he disappointed in? Himself, the kids, the situation, it could have even been, I suppose, disappointment in that this is all happening and keeping him from his ultimate goal, or the goal that he thinks he has. But I saw it that way too. I saw some remorse, and what I thought was maybe even a little sadness in there, because he's like, go look. He doesn't say, look for yourself and see what you've done. It wasn't like that. It was
No.
It was almost like, this is your last chance to see your friend. I don't know. I might be looking a little further into it than I originally intended to, but I definitely felt for him in that moment.
And he also continues to emphasize, and he does in this one too. He said it several times through this season, talked about being hungry. And what was he really? He was scared. He was alone. He saw someone he cared about killed. It certainly changed who he is. It changed his genetic makeup of how he makes decisions about how he views the world. And he, I think at the end, we see at the end, he might have all this wealth. Well, maybe who knows what's going to happen when and how he escapes, if he escapes at all. But he's alone. I really think this is a guy looking for family. And he doesn't know how to ask. Often what we want the most, sometimes we have a really hard time asking for it or knowing how to get it. And I think it makes it really interesting.
I think, Dan, what you just said with him being alone really reminded me of, I think it's the second episode when they're leaving Kim's planet or moon, whatever she was on. And
Third.
Okay. Sorry. The third. Yeah. And the kids are kind of blocking the way on the ship when the X-Wings are coming, and they kind of confront Jod and kind of force him to come clean. And he says something about being alone, also being like them in that. And I remembered from what you were saying when I was watching that third episode, I remembered that line and thinking to myself, that might have been the only true thing he said. Like the way it was acted and portrayed, you could tell there was lots of layers of deceit. But the way that came across with the acting was that he was alone. And that part was honest and sincere. And that's carried through the whole time.
And we had no way of knowing that then. So that's another reason why I think this is such a well-told story, because they are connecting and I've forgotten about that speech. So I'm glad you brought that up, Father Jimmy. Yeah. There's all those threads, these connective tissues, and it's really amazing.
So well done.
All right, Father Jimmy, your next one.
Oh, my next one. I want to talk about kind of right after the lights go out and the kids kick into gear and they contact each other and they formulate a plan and they get back on those hover bikes from the beginning. And at first, and this was one of those first times that I was getting really amped and kind of the audible side came out, even though I was sitting by myself. And, especially when Wim's dad, Wendell, gets on his own bike to track him down. That was such a, I was so excited. I was so excited for that moment because I think it was really starting to show not just the growth from the children, but Wendell's growth in trusting his son, seeing his son, and seeing him not just like trusting his son, but also trusting his own parenting in a new way. Like Wendell is now parenting along in this adventure and this journey. And again, with these ties back into other moments from early episodes, they take the same jump and cut through the woods. And that part was just a very, it was a very fun, adventurous moment, Tom, back to your word, that adventure. I was so stoked at that one. If those listening to this can't see me pumping my fists in the air while I'm recalling this, but
we can hear it.
Yeah.
And on StarWars.com, they say that the creators intended that to be an homage to E.T. With the kids on the bikes. Well, how perfect.
So I had the same kind of feelings that you did when they were all racing on those bikes. And I love that. I did not make a connection to E.T., but boy, when you say that now, I'm like, oh yeah, that is so true. There's something you said that really resonated with me, though, and that is the change in the father and Wendell and Wim's relationship. I would argue that I feel like I had a connection to Wendell in this episode, because I will never forget when I went from being, and I think it was just my children past a line age-wise or maturity-wise, where I stopped being like the person in charge, and I started being a partner in their growth. And I felt like he being Wendell has made that transition, that, okay, I'm going to listen to my son. I'm going to hear what he has to say. And I felt like that really kind of came about in that tennis match conversation that they had at the table, when I think Wendell has the realization that, okay, Wim has something here. And he ends with, well, that's what the supervisor's here to save us from. And he said that as a line just to keep the droid, neutral. And he knew exactly what he was doing with Wim. And so I felt like he had that shift in parenting that was cool, because then he gets on, he gets on to the bike with his kid and is a kid himself again. And I don't know. I'm with you. That was a really cool sequence of events.
It's why it's one on my list, because I think when you're a parent and you have a child that goes away to college for the first time they come back, and Tom, you'll witness this soon enough. The first time they come back, you instantly can't help but just put them back in how they were before they moved out. It's just human nature. It just happens. There may be some parents don't do that, but I feel like I was sort of in that headspace. But there is that delineative moment where you realize, oh my gosh, they've seen things. They've experienced the world. They're different now. They're grown up. Now, Wim's just still a kid, but the things he's been exposed to, different worlds, different planets, he's seen violence. People have tried to kill him. He's had heartbreak in confusion with friends. He's a different person. He's got experience well beyond his years. And I really think that resonated so beautifully. And they only really show us with that family. So I really like that. And I agree. It's like Wendell becomes a kid. Briefly, you almost get the sense he never really did ever get to be a kid. Because of this planet and its expectations and obligations and, passing your exams, and now you're a 7th level supervisor and all this kind of stuff. So it's almost like he got to relate. And, when your kids get older, they're still your kids, but like you said, you're not in charge of them. You live life with them and they become like your friends. Now they're not there yet age wise, but there is that moment where they're like, we're not equals, but we're kind of equals here. And it was great. This show does so beautifully. It really taps into what makes, I think, Star Wars great, or a good story, something we respond to. And it encapsulates real human dynamics and relationships and conflict, but does it under the lens of a fictional universe. And that's why we respond to it so beautifully.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to continue the theme with these, the relationship and with the parents. And I feel like especially we saw that growth with, I think, all the sets of parents. I think it was most evident with Wim and Wendell, and maybe least evident with Neil and his parents. But with Fern's mother, whose name I'm missing.
Yeah. I get it for you. Go ahead.
We see their growth as mother and daughter in the situation they find themselves in. When KB realizes
F-A-R-A. Sorry.
When KB realizes she can fly the ship and get the message out, her parents trust that she'll be okay, where they were worried about her health before. And like I said, Neil's parents, we didn't see it as much, but we also see that I think they had 3 other kids that they got to protect and look out for.
Little ones.
So, yeah, little elephantinis, or whatever you want to call baby elephant. And so they almost, in a sense, they had to take on that parenting responsibility of much more of a protector, because they had little ones, whereas Neil was capable of handling things on his own, even if it meant jumping out of the bubble bath.
Did you ever think you would say that sentence on a podcast, Father Jim?
Never.
This is it. If this is the last show I ever do, I feel like that's a good one to end on. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's Farah. That's the mom, and they definitely kind of go through their own thing too, where she turns against everything that she's believed in by destroying the barrier because she knows it's going to save her family. And that was her very much turning against the structure of the society, which, society's not bad. You need to have society. You need structure. You need that. But this was a different thing. And this is all about reconnecting these families to each other in a substantive way.
I guess I could go to my second
Yeah.
my second point, because it's going to build on this a little bit. And so I want to continue talking about Fern and Farah. I felt like everything you've said about Farah 100%, but I felt like she really kind of flaked out when they went up to the supervisor's, control room, and she just sort of lost herself and she became almost worthless. But Fern
She
really
froze.
changed things. And, her mother says, the barrier was supposed to protect you from things like this. And Fern turns to her and says, we have to do something about it. Yeah, the galaxy is scary and dangerous. Everywhere we went, even the worst places, there were good people too. People who can help us. Which I thought was a beautiful, beautiful speech that you would expect to come from the parent to the child, but here it went the other way. But so that I thought was a wonderful moment, but it became even more wonderful when I think our word last show was juxtaposition, because not long after that, back to Jod, he shares his sort of origin story with them.
Yeah.
When he's talking about, Wim says, you lied, you're no Jedi, you're the real good guys are coming. And Jod, nobody's coming to save you, boy, which I thought that word boy was really strong. Grow up. And then we get his story. When I was your age, starving, lived in a hole until a Jedi found me. So now we're starting to head to the juxtaposition with Fern's story. She may have been as desperate as I was, and she told me I had potential, and she only taught me a little before they hunted her down, and they made me watch while they killed her. That's the galaxy. Fern just said, there's bad places, but there's good everywhere we went. But Jod wasn't willing to see that as hope. He only saw the pinpricks of light, and he's willing to kill for that light. When I heard those two statements almost side by side, I just couldn't help but notice how different these two, the kids and Fern specifically, and Jod see the galaxy. Even though, they've traveled to many of the same different places now. They've been to the Pirate Cove or space station. They've been to Kim's world. They've been all these places together. Even the other, I forget what it is, but the other at Atten, where it's awful. It was terrible. It's like a Hunger Games dystopian, awful place. And Fern still sees the good where Jod sees the bad. And I think it's just the first few steps. He's opened himself up, Jod has. And this is where I started feeling, I think what you're saying, Dan, I started feeling bad for the guy in some ways, not completely. I don't even know if that's what it is. Is it, you mentioned empathy earlier. Maybe that's what I was feeling, because I was so angry about him and at him at the end of episode 7 because of what he did to them. And you mentioned something earlier, and the word that came to my mind when you're talking about the impact it has on children, I think we call that trauma.
Exactly.
And so it was very traumatic. If I were one of the kids, it would have been a very traumatic moment and one I would never forget. But here I am in the very next moments starting to feel kind of bad for him. So anyway, my point that I wanted to bring up was the juxtaposition of the perception of the galaxy from Jod's point of view and from Fern's point of view.
And the way that he sells those lines, and at the end, the last shot we see of him, he's not nefarious and, again, mustache twitching. Like, he has experienced more trauma than any of them.
Yeah.
And, hurt people. We know this to be true. So he has hurt people he's taken life. I think he sees, and when he says boy, I think he resents that boy in that moment because he didn't get to be a boy. I think he resents that he lost his childhood through his experience. And maybe you don't have enough to make an educated guess on this, but I think there's enough there to really take a step back and see this is a hurt kid who grew up to be someone who hurt people, and you don't excuse it, and you don't understand it, and you don't dismiss it. He should pay for his crimes. But there is that part of you that sees if he was back in the day, these would have been the kids he hung out with. These would have been his friends. You know, they took him into their home, the Onyx Cinder, and he was their protector, like you mentioned, Father Jimmy, about the parent aspect of Wendell. And then he became their oppressor, and then he just became helpless. Like when everything was going down and the pirates were showing up, and I mean, he was happy to be in charge, but he wasn't there in the chaos. He wasn't committing any chaos or atrocities. He was letting it happen, so he's still culpable. But I got the sense he lost control there of the situation, and nowhere was that more apparent than when KB's ship was going down. And that again is why I think he's so fascinating, because he's you just can't pin one thing on him. There's just so much more to it. It's really great stuff. All right, my next one, it might be my last one. I don't know. I feel like you guys are bringing up things that have springboard to a lot of great conversations. I love this sequence at the end when there are two beam wings that show up, and they extend all four of their laser points, and they do this blasted concentration of laser cannon fire. That specific type of shooting or laser weaponry in a B-wing you only saw in one thing in canonical Star Wars, and that's the Blade Wing. It was from the Star Wars Rebels episode, I think from season 2. Tom, that's actually the first time you were ever on Coffee with Kenobi.
I remember
when we talked about that. And this was Quarry is the name of the guy. He's named after he's a Mon Calamari, but he's named after Ralph McQuarrie, of course, does all the concept art for the original Star Wars films. And these weapons, and I may or may not have written something about this, but these weapons are higher profile weapons. And I always got the sense, I don't know if it's for sure, that the other B-Wings didn't use them in Return of the Jedi because they didn't have them. Or maybe they didn't, we just didn't see it. There is one motion at the end of Return of the Jedi where there's an extra special laser weapon. But these things are super high powered, so it was really fun to see from Star Wars Rebels showing up here, that weapon. Mm-hmm. And I love that. Also, let's talk about the supervisor. The big reveal of the supervisor. Before I sort of give my thoughts, and I have some ideas here, what did you guys expect, and how did you feel when you saw that the supervisor was basically a big droid?
It was one of the things I had in mind last episode. The last episode we recorded, where I had some theories and some thoughts moving into the finale, and it was pretty high up there in my mind that the supervisor was going to be a droid. But done in a way that they left these kind of little breadcrumbs throughout. And then one of the things Jod says towards the end of the penultimate episode, when he's like, yes, let's go talk to the supervisor. At least it won't be a droid. I was like, it's going to be a droid.
Tom?
I kind of felt like the supervisor, I don't know, I really was trying. I took a lot from the other planet, where there was nothing that implied that there was a droid in that room that had the coordinates of the other planets. And so there's a part of me that kind of felt like we were going to have a pay no attention to the man behind the curtain thing, a totally inept person who hides behind this quote supervisory type of mirror or image or illusion, and I thought it was going to be highly disappointing to Farah and even Fern's dad that this is the guy that's been like driving us and leading us. So clearly I was way wrong, unless there's someone like that behind this droid that we don't know about. But clearly I was wrong, but I found the supervisor to be wildly interesting, especially the way in which, and I don't know if this may lead to someone else's point, but especially the way in which he tricks Jod, or Jod just completely fails into admitting he's lying.
It's hard not to think of Palpatine at the end here. Especially in Mason. I'll give Mason credit. When we were watching this, he said, is Palpatine going to be the supervisor? Because when they show the room, there's all these like black cables and wiring and all this stuff that almost looks like the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker. Even the voice, which wasn't Ian McDiarmid, kind of echoed that. And there's even a line where he says something about watching something with great interest. And it made me think of, we will watch your career with great interest, which is what Palpatine says at the end of Phantom Menace. The fact that he tricked him, the fact that he didn't lose his marbles, well, he does later when he gets stabbed, I guess, but he doesn't lose his mind when he says all the Jedi are extinct. If he would have said something like, do it, kill this Jedi too, and then they jump out, but they come out with stun weapons. So there's the threat of violence, or at least physical restraint. Jod's the one who brings that here. He brings, he breaks up their Eden, and he brings in the violence. But the droids only have stun weapons, and I think it's kind of perfect. I didn't want it to be a droid necessarily, but it made sense. I went with it. Even the dome is shaped like R2-D2's head, which is pretty cool. But it would have to be a droid, because nothing about this planet screams intimacy, right? Even all the parent relationships are stilted. We're going to get you through school. I don't have time to have breakfast with you, but here's something that you can heat up. The mom and the daughter have a very superficial, loving relationship, but there's not a lot there. There's not a lot of time spent, because to really establish a relationship, you need the gift of time with that person, and they don't get that. So it makes sense. It's a droid. I really like it. I hope we get to see more of it. I don't have any crazy theories, because that's just not what I do. But I really thought it was a nice surprise and complete homage to the Wizard of Oz, for sure.
It was a good surprise, but it was a surprise that made sense.
Yes.
You have this planet that is kind of stuck in the past, and it's made it this many years with a supervisor that's maintained things. And the best way that can happen is if you have this program droid that's not going to go off its program and just keeps things running and going. And so when you kind of, like you said, there was a surprise, but it was one that made sense after the revelation.
Feels like this whole series is a referendum on parenting. Don't be so stuck in your ways that you miss the moments that matter the most in your kids' lives. Step away from your job, from your screen, from your obligations, and really look at that person who is looking back at you and thinks you are the world. Really focus on what matters. It's not the money. You need money, yes, to survive, to feed your family, to heat the house, cool the house, whatever, get clothes. But you've got to build in those relationships, which Jod does not have, and look how that affects him. The kids foster one within themselves, and it just becomes a thing of beauty. It's great. I don't have a bunch of extra individual things to talk about here, but I'm happy to see what the two of you would like to add.
I did have something to get your thoughts on. When it came to them retrieving KB, finally getting back together with KB, there's this shot of them running, and they're trampling on the credits as they're running.
Oh, yeah.
And then as she comes out of the ship, it's with this rain of credits as well. And I thought that was an interesting way to do it, where the kids and the parents just do not care about the credits that are there. They're there for KB, their friend. And as the two of you have been talking and shifting my views on Jod and his growth through this episode, it that moment now makes even more sense. That to Jod, he probably would have just seen the credits and not the person, or maybe after seeing the ship go down, initially he would have seen the person in the midst of those credits. But again, it goes back to this sense of like the person over the wealth, over the items, over the material world, the importance of life, and especially that life of KB's that, they kind of hint at with the crash, but I was kind of like, she's not dead. They wouldn't rip my heart out like that.
Oh gosh, I know. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do think that's a beautiful moment, a lovely moment. Because yes, that the credits rain down, and they're trampling over the other parts, because the treasure is her, the treasure is life, the treasure is family and love. And while Jod, the fact that Jod will see both is perfect, because one of the reasons why The Last Jedi works so great to me is because Luke is a fully fledged human being. He's not a myth. And then he constantly fights against his legacy in that story. Because I'm sorry to ruin this, everyone, but when you're an adult, you mess up more than you do as a kid. You have to learn lessons, right? You have to learn lessons all the time. And you learn them and you grow from them, and then you regress. And you got to learn them again and again and again. So he's going to see both, because he's not a couple of realizations. I mean, he's got a long way to go. He may never get there, but there is potential. And these kids are not jaded by that, because they have overcome. And it's so great.
Just real quick on that one, and I do have another one myself, is when I couldn't help but think when that ship opens up, when the Onyx Cinder opens up, it just like belches out all of that all of those credits, and in a way in which it's kind of almost like, is it belching? Is it vomiting? But it's like too much of something.
Expectorating.
And then they just walk on them. They just walk on the credits like they're nothing. To them, they're nothing, because, as you've said, KB is the treasure. The one thing that we haven't talked about yet that fits my word, and is why I think I chose my word, is because the imagination that the kids use in the supervisor's tower, Wim and Fern, when he says, I've called the X-Wings. They'll be on their way, and all this kind of stuff. And Jod's like, they can't get through the barrier. And then Wim just like this, not if you have the crystal of the founders.
That was great.
Ancient warriors up in the northern mountains. And Fern even jumps in on the story, and they just spin this story. Now, Jod's too experienced to fall for it, but they give their best. They give it their best as children, and they use these great imaginations that they have. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they're talking about the story that he's been reading on his little data pad that they also tell us or show us in the credits. I'm probably wrong, but that's what I got from it. But that he uses the literature to make a creative story to try to change or make Jod afraid that this is actually going to happen.
It's a beautiful meta moment, and it also kind of pulls the wait, what's going on here? Because there's a moment when they're showing these images, like the story that he was reading in the first couple episodes, and you think, wait, did we just watch a story like from his adventures? I mean, like, wait, where does the story end in the series begin? And I love that aspect of it, because it's really, really cool. And I don't know if that came from his story or not. I would like to think he just made it up on the spot, maybe inspired by things that he read. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But what a fun thing to even think about.
True adventure.
The power of story and storytelling. Oh, they've been listening to my letters. I've been writing letters every week about this. It's probably how Linus felt when the Great Pumpkin finally showed up at the pumpkin patch. I became Linus there. I don't really know how we try to follow that if you can, friends. Anything else you guys want to bring up before we do a letter grade? And I also want to. I think we can do a letter grade for the whole series too, the whole season. We don't at this point, the time of this recording, we don't know if there's going to be a season 2. We're sure hoping there is. I mean, I think I can speak for the two of you when I say we're hoping that.
I would not be disappointed if they said there never would be.
Same.
If this is the story, oh, bless it. It is a magnificent story. And if I never see these characters again, it'd be sad, but we have great storytelling with them right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think this story was told very well from beginning, middle, and end, and from a writing and acting and a production standpoint. And yes, I want to see these characters again, but when I try to think of how they would get back into a similar type of adventure, it feels forced, and I don't want a forced story with these characters. So like you said, Tom, I'd be happy if this is where they stayed. They're not big points to discuss, just two things that made me really happy in the episode. Again, where I clapped and cheered was both when Wendell punched John in the face. I clapped so much.
That
and I
was great.
So excited. And then when Wim finally lights up his lightsaber in that moment, I was like, I was so excited. I was so excited for them. And both of those two moments were some of my big finally moments where it was just this exclamatory moment for me. And I thought it built well to those moments, and they felt very deserved and not forced.
Wonderful hero moments.
Did you catch when Wim picks it up to ignite it? He does a double look at it, make sure he's got the right side up.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Who has not done that at Galaxy's Edge?
Right.
Yeah. And then my final point, just to hear your thoughts on it. I found it interesting looking at the story as a whole. That there wasn't a lot of big cameos or characters or kind of Easter eggs. I mean, outside of that wonderful holiday special little shot, the rest of it, they didn't have Luke Skywalker come and save the day or any of our
or
the Mandalorian. And I was okay with that. You know, obviously there's always a part of me that wants those characters to show up, but I thought it was really good to tell a story without forcing other characters, because we see this connecting to the larger world, even though it doesn't need to be forced into it.
There was that moment when Wim at the very end turns around and looks up to the sky and the X-Wings fly by, and then they show the New Republic Corvette come out of the clouds or out of the sky, and it hovers over. I was like, okay, here it is. Here we're going to get somebody that we know, and it wouldn't have to be someone big like Leia or something like that, but you know, a Snap Wexley or someone like that stepping out, you know, who's commanded this. And it is just all the more appropriate that they just left it where it was. And you wonder, you know, what my wonder is, does Wim now become someone we're going to see in the future?
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
As a Republic fighter or something like that. Who knows? But yeah, to that point, I think it's wonderful that we didn't have any of that. I loved the mention of Coruscant and Alderaan and Kim saying, whatever, I don't remember now what she says, but she says interesting or something like that, because, you know, or no, I don't remember. She says, she makes some sort of reference to, oh, they clearly don't know.
Right.
But I 100%. I think that's part of what my family liked about Skeleton Crew was it didn't necessarily feel Star Wars to them because there weren't any characters that they knew. It was all brand new. And I was talking to one of our students, Dan, at Steam and Star Wars, that what makes Skeleton Crew so relatable is this is a Star Wars story that kind of looks like our neighborhood.
Mhm.
And the characters are acting kind of like us, and they have a day that's kind of like us. And so it was really easy to relate to the characters, especially early on.
And isn't it cool that the planet and the parents are all about shelter and sheltering and keeping you from other parts of the galaxy because Fern has to see the ugly to see that there's still good and light. And I think that's good. Like that's the bonus of when there is evil, it gives us a chance to do something good, to help, to do something to make a difference. And that's a really interesting point of view. And I agree with you both. Certainly. I could certainly point to several Star Wars Disney Plus series that I was not satisfied with the ending, that I felt didn't have an ending, that I felt didn't even have a story. I think you could probably piece that together if you've listened to the show for the past couple of years. But this one, because it was resolved so quickly, I mean, I'll be honest, when it was over and she looked up at the stars and I saw the Corvette and it was over, I looked at Mace and I go, that's it? That's it? I said it twice. Because I did want that cameo, but then I realized, well, of course I do. I'm like, I grew up watching Hulk Hogan and The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and like, you want that thing where somebody shows up in the ring and comes to the rescue with the chair or the lightsaber or the blast tech rifle, that the Carillion model, but it's okay that it's not there because this isn't a gimmick, right? The rebels are the good guys. Sorry, the New Republic are the good guys. But the real good guys are these four and their parents. That's the real good guys. It's not the myth. It's not the story. It's their story. And it's, I do want to see more, but I do think it stands on its own. And that, as I've said since I was old enough to articulate, is that's how you tell a good story. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. You can leave nuggets. We've got nuggets for other things, but every key plot point was resolved. Everything was resolved. And that is so refreshing. And I applaud the creators behind Skeleton Crew for making this thing happen the way that they did. So let's give a letter grade for the episode, and last minute thoughts. We'll do a round of that, and then afterwards we'll start over. We'll give a letter grade for the series overall. Father Jimmy?
Well, your discussion and your insight into Jod upped my grade on this episode to an A+. My first initial reactions, I wasn't actually too thrilled when I watched it on my own with how Jod wound up. I felt there was a little bit kind of left lingering, but with some of the insights that the two of you pulled out of this, I feel a bit more satisfied, happy with it. So, that's what upped it to an A+. But overall, it was a great episode where we saw the growth of all the characters. We saw a lot of resolution, but they still left it where we like the characters. The characters aren't done. But we are at a point where we trust where they're at, and it was also a lot of fun, adventurous episode on top of that.
I love that, and I love that so much. I'm grateful the conversation could sort of look at me, because that's the beauty of conversation, isn't it, friends? Like, you learn more by listening, and then it helps you process and look at the world differently. Father Jimmy, what grade would you have given it if I just asked you for it when the show started?
I maybe would have gone A-.
Still pretty good.
Yeah, still pretty good. Still overall pretty good. But like I said, there was just that one kind of small thing that I kind of felt with my initial reaction was that they didn't really wrap up Jod's story like they did all the other ones. But this conversation helped with that.
I'm glad. And I was thinking about that earlier today too. I'm like, did they wrap up Jod's story? And I think they did, to the extent that there is nothing to wrap up yet, because he's still a mess. But these kids had done something in him, whether I don't think that he knows that, but I also think that he does know it. Because he got everything he wanted, and shock, he wasn't satisfied.
Yeah.
Because that's not really what it's about. And he's still figuring that out. And hopefully he does.
If there's a story to come out of this, that's it. And it's not under the umbrella of the skeleton crew.
Right.
If we want to know more of Jod's story, it has to be just him.
Yep.
I loved what you said, Father Jimmy, about we can trust where they are. I've never put those words together like that. And I think it's such a magnificent picture in my head that yes, I can trust where these characters are. I've believed in them for so long, and it makes me really, Dan, when you talk about the Hunger Games and your complaint to the Hunger Games is like there's no wrap to any of them. That's what I think of when you say we can trust where they are, because it's done. It's over. The story is finished. Sure, there's more life to live, but this story, this time of their lives, the chapter is closed. And I just thought it was beautiful. And that's getting more towards the series. But for the episode, I give it an A+. When I came into this episode, I thought to myself, I've believed in this series since episode 1. It has captivated me. I fell in love with the characters right away. And I thought it will have to be an absolute train wreck for me to not like this series and this last episode. And it was not a train wreck. And in fact, it was something more. It was a bullet train that pulls into the station so smooth you don't even feel it stop. It just was such a wonderful ride. And that last episode, just such a great, because it played my emotions. I changed my mind on Jod, not completely, but you said it very eloquently, Dan, earlier, and just so many things went so well with this, from parents to kids to, it felt like Star Wars with the space battles, and not the space battle, but the ships and the skiffs and the lasers. And I was like, ooh, this is the one that feels like Star Wars. And the Onyx Cinder, I always do that. The Onyx Cinder just is such a, I love that ship. And we get a SM-33 comes back with just some heroics and final funny kind of quip at the very end, and just everything, just every ounce of it, A+.
Also an A+, our first clean sweep. What I love about this, and I love what you both said, it really kind of made me rethink what I'm going to say. This is a good story. It happens to have the Star Wars moniker on it, but I don't know that the word Star Wars is what makes me like this season. I think it's just a good story. I think it's got good characters. There's a setting and a backdrop, but besides a lightsaber and, a reference to a bike that goes fast and makes that cool noise, and some B-wings and a Y-wing or some X-wings, you wouldn't necessarily know it was Star Wars. I think it would fit in a lot of different universes. And I think that's so important. And I the more I kind of look back at this franchise, and I think about the things that worked for me and the things that maybe didn't land the way that the creators had hoped it would land, is when Star Wars is in a veil for something that's not well thought out or planned or executed, or isn't told to the degree that you take into account the intelligence of the audience. And I don't mean this as a direct pejorative towards anyone, towards any show, towards any character. I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I'm just saying this show works because it works, because the characters meet. There are connective threads that interlock between episode 1 all the way to episode 8. There's growth that is organic, that is earned, that there are payoffs to. You don't have to do heavy lifting to things that don't exist because you want it to work, because you like to talk about lore. It's there because it's there. Inarguably so. And I find that so empowering. I think it was an exciting series. Now, Star Wars is what made me watch it. If you had told me it was about these kids and they run away and there's pirates, and I'm like, maybe. And you start hearing buzz about it. And okay, maybe I'll check it out. And it probably would have hooked me. I don't know. Star Wars is certainly what opens that door for so many things. But I think this worked, not because of Star Wars, but despite Star Wars, because it was just a really good story. And I'm just so excited about that. I'm so happy about that. All right, so let's give the season a great. Should we just all say it at the same time? I mean, I don't know. I think we should. I'm excited about our collared friend and his A plusness of the whole thing. So on 3. I'm just gonna 1, 2, 3. We're gonna say it. 1, 2, 3.
A plus.
A plus. Absolutely. Absolutely. How could it be anything but an A plus? A delight, an absolute delight. I think at some point, gentlemen, we should come back, maybe bring some other friends with us, and maybe we should rank like we would do on Pour-Over. We'll do it on the main show. We'll rank all the Disney Plus Star Wars series. It'll be fun to see where Skeleton Crew ends up.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Tom, we know where you're going to end up. You're going to end up on Teachers in the Dungeon. We'll certainly have you back on Coffee with Kenobi. Naturally, it's Wikipedia official. Let everybody know what's going on at Teachers in the Dungeon. And we've also got a lot of great Steam material to sift through, to listen to enjoy.
Oh, yes. Steam into Star Wars was a great success. Dan, you were there. You're part of what makes that such a successful show. But that was a ton of fun. Lots of content kind of all across the podcast world on that. But Teachers in the Dungeon, what else do I need to say? Adventure continues. The adventure continues, and we talk about it, Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games, and we put education in there as well. And so it's always a good time. We do have episodes on YouTube as well as the podcast itself. And then you can catch us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Love it. And Father Jimmy, again, it's been so great. I know it was extra difficult because of Christmas and Advent, but boy, oh boy, it was such a delight. And selfishly, I just, if you lived in this town, I'm sure we would be hanging out pretty regularly. So it's great to be able to hang out with you in this capacity.
I agree. This has been a blast. It's been so much fun to talk about this great series with the two of you. And probably if we all lived in the same town, I'd get a lot less work done. I'd drink a lot more coffee. I drink a lot of coffee anyway, but probably a lot more. No, it's been a great opportunity, and I've been thrilled by it.
Well, it's been an absolute thrill for me to share the microphone with Tom and Father Jimmy as we looked at Season 1 of Skeleton Crew. Please let us know in the CWK Cafe what you think about not only this episode, but all of the episodes of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. Don't forget to sign up for your no-cost, no-obligation quote and join us on the Disney Wish, June 16th to the 20th. Find out more at the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, Imian Mouse Fan Travel, at coffeewithkenobi.com/Disney Wish. Next week, I will bring you the audio from my live Coffee with Kenobi appearance at Steam Into Star Wars, the annual event that combines education, technology, and, of course, this galaxy far, far away. I will see you all next week. Thank you so much, everybody. This is Dan and Zehr reminding you that this is a podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.